Hello everyone, Burb here. It is registration day for the Taurus Cup, which means, as always, it is time for me to start talking about the next champions meeting, the Gemini Cup. This happens so early because, as always, I subscribe to my own anti-frustration plan, where I don't try to min-max my UMAs after registration day. I find for me personally, I get frustrated and make more mistakes when I'm under a time crunch, so instead I go and I use this time to build parents and to build early aces for the next champions meeting to give myself a shot on future CMs and to become better prepared. This works for me. I think it helps a lot against burnout, which I feel like a lot of people are feeling. But if you don't have any passable UMAs, I do have an emergency guide. You can get there in a day or two. It's fine if you leak a couple days. However, this champions meeting in particular, Gemini Cup, is only 2.5 weeks away at this point because they moved up the schedule a little bit. If you wait until after Taurus Cup ends and you're building aces until the final day, you'll have about a week and a half. So do take that into consideration. This is a broad overview. There will be role guides to come that talk about specific skills for different roles. However, today I will be going over the track itself, the Tokyo 1600 meter, the stat requirements, and I do give justifications for that, parent inherits to get you started building your parents for this champions meeting, as well as the decks that I have tested and run that I think work pretty well, general observations, basically how this champions meeting works in terms of when the race starts to the race ends, how does the flow go, and then finally a suggestion on the plan moving forward and what the plan is for this channel and getting the rest of the guides out. All right, so without further ado, let's talk about Gemini Cup. As some housekeeping, this is the Tokyo 1600 meter turf track. It is under firm, sunny spring conditions, which means that this is a mile track and your green skills are left-handed, firm conditions, spring runner, standard distance, Tokyo race course, and sunny days. Particularly, firm course menace does work as well, so Narita Top Road will be a very good borrow to have. For the track itself, we have done the Tokyo 1600 meter turf track before, and it's very similar if you were in Aquarius Cup to the Tokyo 1600 meter dirt track, with a couple of exceptions. There's nothing too notable about it. The early race has an uphill, but it's in the no zone as what I've been told, and the no zone is essentially, from what I've been heard, it's hard to pass people in it, which means that if you are right against somebody else, this uphill, the speed debuff that you get from not having enough power is not as effective, but you still want to hit power. There's also a downhill in this early race that goes and extends into the corner out of the position keep and then flattens out after the position keep. So your corner skills will probably be your PDM, your final PDM break that goes into the mid-race. So that corner there, Professor of Curvature, is powerful for this reason. There isn't really a miss in the Professor of Curvature because it procs early, it goes and it PDM breaks if you were to get PDM'd at the last moment, and if it procs late, it goes and speed carryovers. So corner skills are very, very powerful. However, straight skills can break your PDM at the very start of the race if you're lucky, and of course you will need late race speed on this track. We will talk about that later. For the mid-race, the position keep ends on a corner on that downhill, and then the corner mid-race, the 777 mark is too early for Christmas Oguri is the biggest thing, and most times you will be looking for skills that are final corner skills. So stuff like your Speed Star, stuff like your Nemesis, stuff like that will be very powerful because if you look, there is a shorter amount of distance to give you a chance of speed carryover compared to full mid-race skills. The spurt itself is just like the 1600 meter dirt, where it's basically a delayed straight. Now, this means that corner skills will work, like angling and scheming, and straight skills will work, like straightaway spurt and new Cheer Halo Ultimate. The late race has an uphill in it. Now, the thing is with uphills in acceleration zones is, again, you do not go and reach your target speed immediately. This uphill is important and power is still important, but if you hit your acceleration, you will probably butt up against the top of the uphill about halfway through. So this uphill looks like a lot. However, it is about half the distance in effect because you haven't reached your target speed because you are accelerating at this point. Remember that uphills go and affect your target speed based on your power, which means I'm suggesting that this is actually a wit track. But Again, I think we'll be pretty much maxing speed, power, and wit, or getting very close to it in this champions meeting. After this, it flattens out, and the Tokyo track is notorious for having a very long final straight. And this means at this point that pretty much this is a pretty balanced CM between front runners, pace chasers, and backliners. Now, I will say that because of certain accelerations in the game, that pace chasers and front runners in particular have a little bit of an advantage in it, but it is not insurmountable for the backline players. For the stat requirements, as always, we need to talk about stamina. In this champions meeting, stamina is fake. The justification for this is really that if you go and just put in 500 guts in any simulator, you'll find that the front runners, because of spot struggle, need about 400 stamina, and 300 stamina is the requirement for everybody else, okay? So the real requirement for 1,000 guts, if you're guts maxing, goes down about 50 for each of these, so 300 stamina for fronts, and all the way down to 200 stamina for everyone else. You will basically be getting 400 stamina without any sparks just from the scenario itself. It just gives you enough scrolls to hit these stamina requirements. So you shouldn't really concern yourself too much about stamina, except that this is a stat threshold map for stamina and guts. That stat threshold basically says that every 300 stats after 1 gives you a speed boost. Now that speed boost, apologies for the overlap, is basically a 5% speed boost for each threshold, but it averages based on the 2 stat thresholds for stamina and guts, which means guts maxing is going to be very powerful as well, just in general, but also because of this additional stat threshold. Now, if you hit 301 stamina and 901 guts, which is what my recommendation is eventually going to be for the guts max build, you get a 15% speed boost because it's 0.15x, because it's averaged from 900 to 300. If you get 601 stamina, 601 guts, it's 15%. And if you get 601, 901, you only get a 2.5% speed bonus. To note the a mile S to mile A ratio is about a 10% speed boost. It's a little bit more than that. So the 2.5% speed boost is going to be something, but I don't think that the stamina gained from it is worth the stat loss and skill point loss you're going to have from trying to hit that 601, 901 is going to be worth the additional 2.5% speed boost. I think that will be the consensus, but if it's not, try it for yourself. But I believe that you will find that it's more important to just get a couple more white skills at that point. Okay, so the stats I think to aim for, I think the guts maxing build will be the primary build, and that will be a 901 guts and a 301 stamina stat spread, where you're trying to aim for about 1,000 power, 1,000 wit, and 1,200 speed, with wit being the most important stat after that, in my opinion. So try to hit 1,000 power, as much wit as possible, and speed. Obviously, if you can't hit these stats, you're not completely out of it, but this is what you should be aiming for if you're running the guts build. If you are running just a speed power wit build or a speed wit build, you can run 601, 601. If you drop down to 301, 601, it's not the end of the world, but you're going to find that the guts is some additional late race speed that will be very noticeable if anyone locks into a duel in particular. So if you're going speed power wit, try to max your speed power and wit, because you need everything to help you against all the amount of guts. We're going to lead right into the deck building suggestions off of this. As I said, I think the two primary builds that you're going to see are full guts build and a hybrid guts build. I find that the hybrid guts build is probably going to be the one that most people try because of its ease of use. The full guts build is super high rolly. It requires you to get summer taps with multiple guts rainbows, and that can be very frustrating. However, the stats that come out of it is absolutely insane. If you're able to get it, you can sometimes see quad 1200 coming out of the full guts build. If you're more free to play, you can go and see that Ayabe power is going to carry you a lot with the combination of that plus Urara. So if you want a more comfy build, you can try the hybrid guts build. The theory behind why it's not even that bad is because Professor of Curvature is very, very strong, and Firm Course Menace is going to give you additional speed and power. You're only behind by a couple skill points at that point. Now, do remember that Guts is about half of a speed point. Now, remember, speed is logarithmic, so the more speed you get, the less important it is, but it does help with the rule of squares because speed and Guts sort of build off of each other. If you lock into a duel, that is where the Guts is really going to be noticeable, because that gives you you speed and acceleration. Some alternatives if you can't do it. First of all, if you don't have Ayabe, you're not out of it. You don't have a power bonus, so you can either run a ton of power sparks, or you can even sacrifice some race bonus for something that has power bonus, like maybe even Yukino Bijin. It doesn't have the greatest guts output, but it does have that power bonus that can help you get that power. All right, so again, you're going for 1,000 power in the guts build if you can. Ayabe does help with it, and also realize that if you don't have max Ayabe, you still have a lot of race bonus on that card in general. Otherwise, speed solo power I think works as well. If you just want to run speed wit, you're losing the guts at this point. You can run some gut sparks to compensate. You're not losing enough to say that you're completely out of it. I know I stressed about the guts build a lot, but again, that is just it's still a high roll strategy. So if you just prefer to do speed solo power wit, it's very, very good. I'd suggest an NTR borrow with your Kidison Black that you hopefully have, or a Shinko Windy, and then go from there with whatever wit and power card you can. The 15% power card is going to go very, very far. Fast and Furious for the late surgers, that Marvy one. Speed wit deck also works as well. However, you will need to somehow get your power up. So 20% power characters would be useful with this, and also your guts needs to be where it's at. So that are two other alternatives, and the last one I think will be surprisingly good is a speed wit pal deck. If you have Fuku, you can try it and see how it fares. You can also just kind of slot in Fuku against one of your guts cards in the guts maxing build. And if you're truly free to play, you might actually find some success with Team Sirius. It does give a little bit of stamina, unfortunately, but it is a roamer card that might get you a couple of good guts taps if the rest of your cards have very high training effectiveness. So if you absolutely have no way of running the guts build, or you don't want to high roll, these are some alternative deck building suggestions. For your parents, we are in a corner straight, it's delayed straight, so your corners work. Your corner skills are going to be Saiyan Sky for your front runners. As per usual, we are going to go and attempt to get into first place as a front runner. Now, the new Nishino Flower is very good for pace chasers because it's 3rd through 4th. And for end closers, this is not a Dober map, but it is still a Ryan map for 6th place. Ryan alt, I don't even think is required due to the amount of acceleration options you're going to find in regular skills. But Ryan alt is purely 6th place, and King Halo requires you to be in the back half of the pack in the first half of the race. So these are your base parent inherits. If you are building parents and you own these, it might be useful to build these, but you could also, because each of these only gives about 2.7 to 3.5 links, there's another set of skills and parents that give you roughly 2 links apiece, even on inherit. Okay, I'm going to grab a drink of water. And that is those speed carryover ultimates. And even the 0.15s are useful on this, and they have greater value. The big one here is Shadow Break for backliners. Now, the backliners Shadow Break gives you a 0.25 if you satisfy the condition in the mid-race of a challenge. Nemesis is great, and both grooves are great. There's a bunch of these that are these final corner skills with conditions that are fairly easy to proc. And if they speed carry over, they give you about half to 3/4 of what the acceleration option gives you, but there's no diminishing returns on this, which means you can go and lean on your no stopping me's, or your nimble navigators, or your lobby gamble ultimate, like maybe you do a Nishino Flower. I'll talk about that in a second. Or some sort of backliner gamble. The front runners, I had a little trouble finding one of these, but Mayano, surprisingly, actually is a speed carryover possibility. I'm sure there's another one that I'm missing for this. The last thing to note is that you can lobby gamble, like I said. The way that this works is that, hey, 3rd position and 4th position may be accessible to you if you're finding people aren't running front runners and stuff. It just depends on how everything's going to shake up. You might find late surgers and end closers with Daring Strike will have enough mid-race, especially if you build enough mid-race, to get into those late positions. And when you hit 3rd or 4th on a backliner, that means that you are very fast in 3rd position, hitting an acceleration and probably winning the race at that point. It is a sort of high roll strategy, but lobby gambling will certainly be a thing. Dober alt does not work because this is a track where the final corner is in the mid-race, and it's too early to proc, as well as Red Maru, the final corner is in the mid-race and not the late race. Taiki alt doesn't work as well because it just happens too early on an inherit. However, you can run Taiki as herself, and you do basically get some guaranteed acceleration in that third and fourth position. And I find that this is a pretty good combo with Nishino Flower because you basically will get a very short 0.4 into a Nishino Flower extended 0.2. So you'll get like 0.6 effective, and then that's pretty much enough on its own. You just grab speed skills to try to fight for third or fourth. All right, some general guidance when you're building is don't chase your thresholds. As I said, getting 601 stamina and 901 guts is probably worth less than just running more races and grabbing more skills. That 2.5% speed, if it's not coming just naturally to you from scrolls, is probably not worth the loss of stats or the loss of skill points. The miles are still skill CMs. They're still skill CMs. So even if you have 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200, if you're unable to get some good skills, you're going to find you struggle in the late race because people are going to be blowing past you with stuff like Rudolph alt plus homestretch haste, IBAM, beeline burst, stuff like that. The miles are just still skill CMs. The shorter tracks, the skills matter so much in the mid race and in the late race. And also try not to use stamina sparks unless they're the only good parents that you have. I believe they're pretty much useless at this point for this CM because the stamina requirements are so low itself, because you only really need to get 301 if you're running the guts build, and even if you're running the speed power whip build, you don't necessarily need to get 601. You can still go around 400 and be perfectly fine. Some observations about how early tests have been going. Nimble Navigator and NSM is very unreliable because you choose your lane prior to the spurt. However, they are very, very potent when they proc, and you will find that you will win races from Nimble Navigator and no stopping me. So my personal suggestion is if Nimble Nav appears on your run and you don't have any really more mid-race to have, it's a good secondary acceleration to grab and pick up. Mile S will be very noticeable, especially if you don't have the guts to support it. Firm Course Menace is also quite noticeable. However, also the guts that you're grabbing is giving you a bunch of speed as well. So you're going to see very, very fast Umas that have Mile S, Firm Course Menace, and Guts build combined. If you can grab two of those, you're in a good position. NTR is a very good borrow. It's not 100% required. Christmas Oguri overstamps, so she basically loses a bunch of skill points, and there's no real good trigger on it. Moxie is a late proc, which means she doesn't get any speed carry over from it, and also actually it procs early. I'm dumb. Yeah, there is a uphill in the early race, so Moxie shouldn't even work. Now, Aurora alt 6th through 9th on the final corner. I've seen some people suggest it. It's a little bit tough if you're in 6th through 9th, and also Cheer Halo alt works from there, so I don't find Christmas Oguri has too much of an advantage over it. However, it is still basically a mid-race speed skill, so she still will exist. It's just she will be behind you in skill points. Other things, like I said, the guts is noticeable. If you get into a duel, it's going to help your acceleration and speed, and you're going to find characters with 1200 guts that basically when they lock into a duel, they're in it for pretty much the rest of the race. Lobby gambling is real. You're going to find that you will hit 3rd and 4th position as a late surger if there isn't any front runners, and you're going to find sometimes there's 5 front runner lobbies that the pace chasers are locked out of it. The most important observation that I found, and if there's one that you could take with you, it's this one, is that you control a third of the lobby, and your team comp really affects your success rate this time, because pretty much every acceleration is either a positional based acceleration or an acceleration that requires interplay between two separate Umas, and you can control that somewhat. I think a lot of people know that, hey, your positions that you choose to dictate which positions are available to you. If you run a bunch of backliners, you may find that 3rd and 4th position is available to you if you build enough mid-race, where if you build a bunch of front runners, they probably aren't going to be. The other thing that a lot of people know is that, hey, Nimble Nav triggers for adjacent roles like pace chasers and late surgers. If your pace chaser doesn't hit, your late surger can go and Nimble Nav off of them. It's the same thing with like multiple front runners. The front runner that doesn't hit possibly could get Nimble Nav, a front runner that doesn't hit can Nimble Nav a pace chaser for you, stuff like that. The thing is that all the stuff that's been added to the game, like Halo Cheer Alt, it basically is dictated by the lobby composition. If you run 3 late surges or end closers, your cheer alts are going to be a little bit wacky, because if they go and they fight against each other, they'll just go into the front half of the pack for a split second, and your cheer alt will not work. Stuff like Brian alt, which is for speed, carries over. If you're running a flood on a singular roll, like if you're running triple end or triple late surger, you're going to find that the challenge happens a lot more often than if you're running split, like a front runner, an end closer, and a pace chaser, stuff like that. So consider what you're running. If your goal for the race, how you're going to win the race with your accelerations, and build your team comp around that. If you're building stuff like a late race passing ultimate, you might want adjacent things like pace chaser late surger, or late surger end closer, or pace chaser front runner. If you're going and trying to do stuff like on your left gambling, you might want stuff like a front runner and a late surger and an end closer, or something like that. So just take that into consideration. I find that the team comp actually matters quite a bit, and this is a good time for you to learn how to go and affect it yourself. All right. So that has been the overview. I hope you have enjoyed it, and it has gotten you started and has gotten you ready to go and test things for yourself. I will be trying to get the roll guys out rather quickly this time. One thing that I will be omitting this time is I won't be doing every single character in the videos to keep them shorter than the last CM and previous CM. I think it has been a long time coming. I will instead export it probably into a separate video where I go over all of them at some point. So I hope at this point that you can see that certain characters sort of build the same way together. I will be giving a cross section of the characters for each of these. I also will be going and just picking one of the 4 that I understand. As soon as I understand each of the roles, I'm going to be going through the various different guides in the role order that I decide at this point. And at the very end, of course, we have the debrief. Always remember the anti-frustration plan. If you subscribe to it like I do, I like to start by building a singular meta Uma that is passable. Passable just means literally can run the race and give me a chance of winning. This just lowers my stress level so that I can either build an Oshi or a future Uma. If you do not have like any parents, you might want to start with step 3, build one of the parents on the parents section. Your meta Umas this time probably are stuff like Taishin, Narita Taishin, Cheer Halo, Nishino Flower, Bourbon Valentine, Summer Maru, the standard stuff that you see in a lot of Champions Meeting. Any of the parents also works for this. So if you need parents, build your future Uma first. So build the Uma that will go and progress the account for either this CM or a future CM. So stuff like if you have Cheer Halo, you can start building Cheer Halos. You can start building Nishino Flowers, etc. And then go back, build a meta Uma, make one passable, and then start building your Oshi, and then you rinse and repeat over and over and over again until you're happy with your whole team. Memberships are available. Last thing to note is to shout out the board tier, the people, everyone. I thank you for your support, whether you are just watching the video or you are monetarily supporting it. It is not required, but for those in the board tier, I do shout out your name. Thank you especially to Kiko Z IRL, Sorcerer, Immobility, Mr. Merritt, Cress of Gautier, Lucifel, Oguri Cap Eats a Burger, and Peter Van San 1054. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this overview video. Good luck in the Gemini Cup. Good luck in the Taurus Cup. Take care, everyone. Burbout.